Sean.
How are you?
Good. Doing well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you look well,
Thank
even
you.
after you've just moved into a new house and what have you. So,
Yeah.
which we'll talk about because people don't get the sense of what we were just chatting about before I hit the record button. So we'll bring that topic up as well.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much for doing this. I know not necessarily probably something you expected to do on a Monday afternoon when we're recording this, not necessarily when we're broadcasting it. But I really do appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody who's tuning in. Welcome to Did You Know That? My channel where I get to talk to interesting people about interesting or annoying things, but the people are always interesting. And today's going to be a bittersweet one for me, and we will explain why as we go forward. For those of you just joining us, thanks very much. For those of you returning, also thank you very much. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so, along with the bell so that you get reminded when new videos get posted. My name's Sean O'Rourke. I am the host of this channel, and when I'm not hosting these videos, I'm helping companies prepare to be hacked as a cyber liability consultant. So if you want to know more about that, you can go check me out on LinkedIn. And Morgan, you get to tell the fine folks what and who you are.
Awesome. I'm Morgan Mitchell. Nice to meet everybody. I actually work at the trade desk. I am on their business development team. But I think today we're here to talk about my cancer journey, being diagnosed at the age of 28.
That we are. First of all, what's trade desk do? Before we get into the other stuff.
Yeah, the Trade Desk is a digital platform for people to buy advertising. Think digital out of home, CTV, any kind of medium that you're able to do on one platform. So it's an omni-channel, buy-side only platform designed for agencies and brands.
Whew, that's a mouthful. And if
It
you didn't
is.
understand it, you can check out Morgan's LinkedIn page as well, because she has a pretty fascinating background. But we are here to get a little bit personal, and that's why it's bittersweet, because you folks are looking at one of my favorite people on the planet, and not just because she is an excellent football player, by the way, who to this day made
Hands
one
of
of the
gold.
That's right, made one of the finer catches I have ever seen on a football field. Maybe we'll get to relay that to everybody as we go down the line. But as you did mention, you were diagnosed with cancer at 28, and you are as of this recording on, what is this, September 14th? You're how old?
Yep, 31. So
31.
It'll be 3 years officially being diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. December 1st will be my 3-year anniversary.
So there was also something else that happened on December 1st of that day. What else happened on that day?
Yeah, no. So actually the day that I found the lump in my breast, I actually was proposed to by my husband. We were in Yosemite. God, it's beautiful out there. Go visit the
one
national.
of my favorite places in all the worlds.
Yes, visit your national parks.
Yeah.
My husband and I climbed Yosemite Falls hike, and at the top, he proposed. So I'm sure the entire hike up, he was thinking about the rock in his pocket. Meanwhile, I was thinking about this weird thing that I felt in my breast, and I was like, I just had run the New York City Marathon. I was like, is it something from that? But yes, at the top, he proposed. So we didn't really know what it was at that point. But
when did you get the actual diagnosis then?
About a week later, a week and a half later. Yeah.
So I want to tell people that, again, you and I have known each other. I don't even know how many years at this point. I'd
9?
have to go back. Yeah, I was about
9
to
or
say 10 years
Yeah.
at this point. So when I heard the news, I mean, I think cancer is always unfair to people, but I thought it was particularly unfair. But that's because of our relationship. I want to get a sense, what went through your head from the time you found it to the time you got the test to when they actually told you what it was? What was your thought process? Yeah. Take people through that, because I think a lot of people have misconceptions of what goes on in somebody's head.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Everybody's built differently. I think for me, knowing that it felt foreign, to be super candid. I was really freaked out. I called both my parents, asked them, do we have any breast cancer in our family? Like, this just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like an cyst or like something else that like could potentially be removed easily. If that's easy to say. It was very hard. And so I was honestly freaked out when I first found it. Had a massive panic attack at 6 a.m. because naturally, as New Yorkers, we're always up early. But when you go to California, like New York time, you obviously wake up even earlier. But I was fortunate enough actually to have one of my girlfriends be a PA for one of the top breast surgeons in New York City. So I called her immediately. She kind of calmed me down and was like, listen, whatever it is, 80% are benign, like go and enjoy your vacation. Because we actually were out in Yosemite for Thanksgiving holiday. So we were doing a couple days in Yosemite, and then we're going to go meet my family up in the vineyards with some extended family. And it's so funny. I surround myself with all these different PAs. So another one of my girlfriends, who's more like a cousin, was also a PA. We went and celebrated our engagement with them and did Thanksgiving with them. And she also said, hey, like, just go get it tested. Don't freak out yet. So once we got back from Thanksgiving break, I just kind of went into autopilot of like, okay, let's go see what this is. Luckily, my girlfriend Gabby was at the appointment. And then really it all kicked in, I would say the following, so that was Monday. So the Monday, once I got back, I immediately got it tested. The Tuesday morning, I vividly remember sitting in like a phone booth in my office, getting a call from the doctor where she was like, you need to come back in, like it's suspicious of cancer. And I just like was in such shock. You almost go into like not fight or flight mode initially, but you compartmentalize and just try to like get through the next steps. Like I remember my manager at the time, he was such a teddy bear. He's freaking awesome. Like has 2 daughters, all these sisters, a wife, like his mother-in-law lives with them. And he was like, women's health, man, like there's so many things that like you guys get tested for and it's scary, but like, it's going to be fine. Like I'm here for you. He even offered to come, which was so nice. I was like, I'm good. Like my girlfriend's going to be there. But I think honestly, from an emotional standpoint, I was sheer shock. You just kind of go through the motions. My husband at the time was actually in Cleveland when I got the news. So that was hard, that he wasn't able to be with me when we got the official news. But by the time all of my scans and everything were done, when I went back in for additional testing, he like had come right off of the LaGuardia, like straight to the doctor's office, and was there when we did hear like officially that it was cancer. But it's still hard when you're just like, well, what is this? And you always think this is never going to happen to me. I remember training with my girlfriend, Gabby, who was the PA, and my friend Taylor, and she would tell us these stories. And when I say training, this is training for the New York City Marathon of, oh, I had to diagnose a 21-year-old with cancer today. And I'm like, what? Like, how does this happen? You know, and things that you think would never happen to you happen to you. And I think that it's how you deal with them that really tests your character. And for me, that first week, it was sheer shock. It was going and just compartmentalizing. So I actually was working the whole week because for me,
I'm going to stop you there because I want to ask you this. You said you were in a phone booth in your office when you got the official news to come back in because it looked suspicious. Did you still work the rest of that day?
No. So I pulled my manager aside and told him, I have to go. And he was great. He literally was like, whatever you need, like you go and just take care of yourself. And I get worked up, but it's just the humanity in it. And like everybody, you know, at the end of the day, all you care about is like each other and your health. And I think that was like the first time in my adult life where you start to learn that like your whole world is not just about these big life events. It's about like this kind of raw emotion and the opportunity to help others. And I would say like at the time, I don't think he realized, like he kind of set the stage for me being calm to go into this. And I don't, you know, I've told him thank you a bunch, but it's just one of those things, like that's just a good lesson to learn of like in these situations when people are dealing with things, like you ask what you can do and how you can help.
Right.
And it's like being that calm person on the other side of the phone. I think that that's huge. Or in his case, that calm person sitting across from the table in a conference room.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, now everybody knows why I have this with me. So, because if you go, eventually I'm going to go, but I'm working on it. I'm working on it. Okay.
Yeah.
So what happens next? You go back in for the testing.
Mm-hmm.
You're already under the impression that it's suspicious of cancer, or is definitely a cancer of some sort. Mm-hmm. Take folks through the next steps.
Yeah. So when you get these kind of diagnoses, especially with breast, since it's like you can get to it, they typically do what they call like a needle biopsy first. So that's what I had done on Monday. The needle biopsy then came back suspicious for cancer, which means there's something going on. So Tuesday I got that news. And then the additional tests for breast cancer specifically that you need to get are sonograms, mammograms, and then a core biopsy. So that's actually a larger chunk of tissue that they pull out to do a larger sample with, I think they do some fish testing, and basically they run a bunch of tests to understand the type of cancer you have and the biology of cancer that you have. And so that process is a little scary. You know, you go in and you're in a radiology center, you go get a mammogram, and at 28, like I hadn't had a mammogram before. Right. So for all of my women out there, if you know of any relation, whether it's aunt, friend, whatever, just push yourself to have a mammogram as early as you possibly can. I didn't know that having a baseline is always a good thing. And I didn't even know as a 28-year-old what a baseline means.
Right. Let's be honest. You're 28. And
yeah.
I mean, you said you had asked your mom and your dad this question, but what was their answer? Did you have a history? So no history.
So that's what they said.
Right. But you're the first, basically the first recognized case on either side of your family's tree.
Yeah, at that time. So then obviously, I also called my parents once I found the news that I had to go back. So I go in for the series of testing. So the sonogram, the mammogram, and the core biopsy. Luckily, the breast surgeon for Gabby, who Gabby had worked with, was like, go shadow Morgan. It's good for you as a PA to understand what the patient has to go through. So she was there with me the whole time. So I was so fortunate, to have a friend by my side that was able to actually be in the room. I mean, she was holding my hand while this guy was taking a huge needle to my breast to pull things out, which is just crucial. It's, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, look, everybody listening to this is envisioning the needle, envisioning that needle being stuck in you, and probably doing what I just did was just cringe.
Oh, and I'm like not a needle person. So I got to tell you, like before this, I would faint when I would give blood. I hated needles. Unfortunately, you get over that real quick when you get the diagnosis that I did. So you go through all these exams, then obviously they have to be analyzed and sent off for testing. And so we got the news, I want to say, so that was Tuesday that I went through all of that. By Wednesday night, Thursday morning, we had found out that it was in fact breast cancer. The next stages that they do is then see, has it spread? Mm-hmm. And so they ordered a PET scan for me to have done on Friday. So by Friday, my mom was already in town, Bob was back, and Bob had been back by Tuesday, thank God. Otherwise I would have been a wreck.
And Bob was your then fiance, now husband.
Yeah, then fiance. And so, you know, we went in, and funny story of all of this is like, you just have to find the humor in it. And I'm so thankful I married a funny guy.
I can attest, he is funny.
The dad jokes are wild. Yeah. He's hysterical. So we like go in for this PET scan, and like, they make you drink this liquid, right? That basically contrasts your whole body. Right. And the one shake that they gave me, which was a vanilla shake thing, it basically said that it could be consumed either orally or rectally. So you could imagine the heyday that my husband had while him and my mom were just dying laughing about that. And every time we have a PET scan, Bob's like, oh, orally or rectally? I was like, you're disgusting. So
I'm going to assume it's always been oral.
Yes.
Okay,
come on.
Hey, the audience will want to know. I'm trying to get all the facts straight. So
all the facts.
All the facts, ma'am.
Yes, all the facts. So yes, I drank the vanilla shake. It was really funny. They were like, "Did you exercise yesterday?" And I was like, "No, you told me I couldn't exercise. I didn't eat carbs. I didn't have sugar. You're driving me nuts." And I go in for this scan, and they basically said, "Well, are you sure you didn't work out?" And I was like, "I ran the New York City Marathon a month ago." And they were like, "Well, we can tell." So it's funny that they can basically tell your muscle density from this PET scan and like how you metabolize sugar.
Wow.
I didn't realize that. So that
Me
was
neither.
a funny learning. And then, so I went in and I was the first patient. So by 4:00 that afternoon, we got the results that it actually had spread from my breast to my liver. And that call was really hard. It was my mom, my dad was on speakerphone, Bob, fiance, and we were in my breast surgeon's office, and the breast surgeon was upstate and she was on speakerphone, and the two PAs, including my best friend, were there and kind of walked us through. Listen, the next steps are seeing an oncologist. Breast surgeon is not the best next step for you considering it's spread. They view stage 4 breast cancer differently. So at that point, we went into resource mode. Who do we know where? How can we tap into our network? How do we know which oncologist is the best, let alone I remember introducing Susan to my mother to try to figure out all the insurance stuff. Thank you, Susan. Walking us through everything, because you just don't know until you're thrown into those situations. Yep. So I had about 3 oncology appointments. I liked 2 of my doctors. And then I also had to go for a liver biopsy to ensure that whatever tumors were on my liver were actually connected to the breast cancer. And so we were able to get that done the following week. And then the other thing too that they throw you into is fertility. So for women, particularly of the younger age, they advise you to get and do 1 round of IVF so that you can have eggs frozen, just in case. Right. You have to do radiation or anything. And so that was hard. That was one of those things. I was just we just got engaged and now you want me to talk about kids? I can't talk about kids right now.
While I'm fighting cancer.
Right. Yeah. While I'm fighting cancer, while I'm trying to work, while I'm trying to do everything else. Mm-hmm. So I think that was hard. That was really hard for me, but we were able to get a first appointment with Cornell. And that's another thing, of just being a good human and being compassionate. I will say, when you get this type of diagnosis, it's just insane how your tribe really rallies to help you, and introduce you to connections to make things happen. Yep. So that's been, I guess, too, another learning point for me. I feel like I'm almost a 60-year-old woman with how much I've learned, especially with the breast cancer stuff. Does that answer that question? Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what I always found amazing, because as we talked, so my father-in-law passed away from a reoccurrence of cancer a couple of years ago. One of my best friends has had multiple battles with skin cancer. And what I've always found amazing was that time is of the essence, but they can't rush anything. I mean, there's a process, there's a procedure, there are steps that you have to take. And while everybody thinks the moment you get the diagnosis, it's sort of sprint, it's more akin to your New York City Marathon. It's basically, and I'm speaking because I have inside info because of the knowledge I have, but it seemed to be, you were in a marathon. It was just a steady pace, maybe with some sprints in there, but you just had to take it step by step and move at a deliberate pace.
Yeah, I think the marathon training, never did I think it would prepare me for something like this, but it definitely did. I think that the hardest part about it is when you have a lesser stage, and I don't want to say lesser, cancer fucking sucks no matter what stage it is, but when it's stage 1 or stage 2, you can beat it within a couple of years. And then, your fear is that it's always going to come back. So that sucks. And then with stage 3 and 4, you're in a different battle where they view it as a chronic disease. And so for me, I think so often or not, when I do have breakdowns, it's breakdowns about, God, I'm still here. I'm still fighting this marathon. When is the other side going to happen? And I think that, 3 years later even, or what am I, like 2 years and 3/4 through this,
something
is
around
something
there.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's really interesting, that mental battle, and that the similarities of getting through a marathon and the types of training. I just never thought that the parallels would be in my personal life, like from a health standpoint. Like I thought I would apply it to work, not apply it to living.
Well, I'm going to give a piece of inside advice or insider knowledge about you. You have one of the most positive attitudes I have ever found. In fact, your positivity sometimes was grating because I just want to be annoyed or frustrated, and I was never around you when you won, and that is an amazing quality to have. And I have to believe that has assisted you in some ways, because if you were sort of already a downer or a pessimist, these 3 years would have been more torturous than they've already been for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, it's about who you surround yourself with. Like the right people will always lift you up and keep you positive all the time.
Yeah,
and
well, yeah,
that's
I don't see you being around any negative people. I mean, that would just be, that would have
torturous.
never worked.
No.
Probably not for the other person. You would have just overwhelmed
Probably
them.
not. Yeah.
You would have
They'd
overwhelmed
probably be
them.
running away from me.
Just stop with the sunshine already, will you?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so it's been 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
You've had how many different procedures, treatments, rounds of whatever in those 2 3/4 years?
Yeah. So to take it a step back, and then we can dive into that. Finding your oncologist and the right fit is super huge. So we talked about that. I met with 2 different oncologists, about 3, and I landed on one at MSK and one at Mount Sinai. And it's all about fit and personality, and same, you want to make sure they're super positive. And I think the funny thing is, I actually had thought that we were going to go MSK. And then when you have these more challenging cases where it's a younger patient, it's metastasized, they all kind of, the oncology community just really works together. And so unbeknownst to me, when I went in for my second appointment with MSK, my 2 oncologists that I liked a lot already had talked, and they basically were like, listen, there's a clinical trial available for exactly what you have. So when you get diagnosed with cancer, they look at the biology of the cells to determine if you have any positive biology. So for breast cancer, it's ER, PR, and HER2. Those are the 3 types of, I want to call receptors. I think that's what they call them. But I had 2 of them that were positive in my liver and 1 that was positive in my breast. So somewhere along the line, it like mutated, but Mount Sinai actually had a clinical trial available. So your first step, and always kind of your first line defense, is to try a clinical trial. Mm-hmm. So it was called the Aspire trial. And I basically went into MSK. He had Dr. Klein on speaker. So you have Dr. Seidman standing there, and then Dr. Klein on the phone being like, we talked, this is the best option for you. Otherwise it's going to be chemo, and we don't think that that's like the best route to take. And so when you're looking at immunotherapy options, so when you do have these positive receptors that you can essentially shut off like a light bulb, that's where immunotherapy comes into play. And so they kind of talked me through this, and Dr. Seidman used an analogy about an encyclopedia, the fact that you want to have really large chapters. You want basically your cancer story to be a massive encyclopedia with really large chapters, and each chapter is a treatment. So I've been fortunate enough to only have 2 chapters thus far in the 3 years. And so the clinical trial I had mentioned was the Aspire trial, and it married a few different drugs. So it's always kind of a cocktail of things. Mm-hmm. One of them was estrogen suppression, this lovely drug from Pfizer called Ibrance, which is a palbociclib, and then Herceptin and Perjeta, which are 2 drugs targeted to HER2, which is like this positive thing in my liver. They came out in the 90s, but they've been known to really help decrease those cells and stop the cancer growth in tumors with HER2 positive. So I was on that for about 9 months. And I started right after Christmas. or right before Christmas. Yeah, I started my treatment. So the funny thing is, we talked a little bit about fertility, but I went through one IVF cycle and then basically like had my egg retrieval. The next day I started cancer treatment. So like
Gotcha.
when we talk about your ups and downs and everything, like that was just an emotional roller coaster. Cause then you also have like the whole ethical thing of like having cancer and having kids. And, you know, I don't even know how I feel about it now. Obviously I want them, but like, that's for Bob and I to decide later on, but at least we have the option. And so basically from there started the trial. First 9 months were great, shrunk tumors, things were awesome. And then all of a sudden my numbers started going back up. Things were not going, and things were not going well, and I was not responding to treatment. So at that point, in the trial, they PET scanned me every quarter, so we could start to kind of track. And so the September PET scan showed that there was additional growth and that I needed to, you know, make some changes. And so what we ended up doing was waiting. So they always like to wait and say, okay, like, you know, let's triple check again in September. So then it was December that I got a PET scan. Yeah. And they confirmed, yes, the trend is not just a dip, it's definitely continuing to go on the rise. So my team and my oncology, both doctors, agreed that the best next step would be to push for Kadcyla, which was like a version 2 of the Herceptin and Perjeta. And I've been on Kadcyla with immunosuppressants, so it's Kadcyla and then fulvestrant. And like the piece of the puzzle here that I'm also missing giving to you is that I ended up having my ovaries removed. So as a BRCA2 positive person, you are also susceptible to ovarian cancer. And so sitting with that news, letting it process, my doctors were like, you're already on treatment. It's not like you're not on cancer treatment. So don't make this decision lightly. You can't just like put your ovaries back in. So I had those taken out as well, which would also help from the estrogen standpoint. So that's I no longer have to get these awful shots where they shoot like a pill, which is basically the size of your pinky, like into your belly, which is awesome. No more of those. So that was super good.
I mean, that again, cringeworthy moment.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I'm happy about all of this because the crazy thing is, like, I've made friends with my care team. They're all amazing. They've all been by my side. I mean, I was planning a wedding during all of this. You know, they knew that my end goal was to have hair, like look normal, be able to, you know, go on with my daily life as much as I can and make sure that Taxol and all these crazy chemo drugs are like my last and final resort. And that's, yeah.
Well, I mean, to your point, your hair looks amazing. You've changed jobs at least once during treatment, right?
Yep.
So you're still working. How do you feel? Physically and mentally and emotionally?
Yeah. I would say it's a roller coaster. Most of the time, like real talk, 60%, I am the most positive, happy person ever. And the other 40 is challenging. You know, you feel overwhelmed. How do I accomplish things? How do I get through just the day when I'm tired after treatment, and learning how to share your story with new coworkers without freaking them out. Because my prior company I was at for 6 years. So they were really, I mean, they were there for my first 2 years of going through all of this and really by my side. So also leaving that kind of family that you've created in a work environment was challenging, but you know, I'm really happy with where I landed, and everybody's been super supportive. But I would say, you know, 40% of the time it's just trying to figure it out and trying to make sure that you are level-headed. And I think that with COVID, people are kind of getting a little taste of what cancer patients have. Like every day is uncertain, you know, we never know if I'm going to wake up and feel terrible and have to go in, or if over time my treatment's going to stop working and I'm going to have to do something more serious that could be really detrimental to my bones or have awful side effects. And I think that the lessons that people are learning now and how to deal with uncertainty, it's a taste of what cancer patients go through every day. And so I hope that people, you know, understand that that we're like, we also can be a resource during this time. A lot of my girlfriends have been asking me, like, how do you deal with like not knowing anything? You just kind of have to live life.
You kind of suck it up and just, you know what, I'm here at the moment and I got to go.
And that was challenging. Like, you knew me when I was hard charging in my 20s, like always planning, focused on something. And I think that getting kind of a swift kick in the ass from a health standpoint really puts things on the map. What's important, you know, it's getting outside, it's
hard
hiking
charging and kicking ass and what have you. Who are you kidding? That really hasn't changed. I mean, look at,
no.
I want you, when I release this video, I want you to go back and listen to yourself. You basically are Grey's Anatomy is what this video is going to remind people of. You just reeled off medical, drugs, terminology, everything like it was second nature to you. There's no way you came to that just by sitting back and being an observer.
Yeah, well, I don't WebMD, and I don't recommend anybody WebMD.
No.
It's just showing up with a notebook and a pen and making sure you can absorb all you can from your experts. That's the best thing that you can do. And I would say that I'm just different in a hard charging way. It's like, I'm not as, I would say, like forceful with it or like in your face as I probably was in my 20s. Like, I'm a little bit more tactful and strategic.
You mean in terms of how you approach certain things?
Yes. Yeah.
That's too bad, because I watching you. So for the Marvel fans out there, Morgan is akin to Juggernaut. For all the Marvel fans out there, she basically just puts her head down and blows through anything that's in front of her. So don't believe her when she's saying more tactful. That just means she might stop and look at the wall for a second before headbutting it into oblivion. So for the non-Marvel fans, go Google Juggernaut and you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, so how's Bob? How did he take everything? How did he been the last 3 years? I know the answer to this, but the folks watching this might not know. And this is a man who, within a week of proposing to you, finds out that you have cancer, and he, from what I could tell, never wavered one iota.
No. And he'll even like
and
slap
who would?
me.
I mean, come on.
He would slap me for saying this, but I was like, you know, like if this is too much, like we don't have to. And he just looked at me and was like, I'm going to stop you. Like, I know where you're going with that comment. Like, I'm here. Like, we've been dating for 5 years. Like, I'm not going anywhere. Don't think that I'm just saying, okay, bye. Like, no, who does that? He's been really good, I would say. His background, just for everybody, is his mother had a bunch of health issues. And so it's one of those things that he's grown up with, kind of learning and having to understand how to adapt with health issues. And so, you know, she's in her 70s, still kicking it after having multiple kidney surgeries. And he's learned from that. And I'm just so grateful because he helps me kind of approach life and taking each day as it comes.
Well, I follow you on Instagram and I know that's true. So
he pushes me up a mountain, literally, most of the time, although sometimes I'm beating him up the mountain, but it's
that
good.
Is definitely true. I know that. So are you still as active as you were before, or do you have to have some limitations on what you do?
Yeah, great question. I'm not training for any marathons anytime soon.
Is that by choice or because of your health condition?
I'm just more tired.
Okay.
And so when you train for a marathon, I mean, you're tired all the freaking time. Yeah. So it's just doing classes, like 45-minute kind of stuff when I can get it in. A lot of it's actually been more to focus on diet and kind of understanding how and what types of foods turn into sugar. Sugar is not a good thing for cancer patients. So trying to learn and as much as I can in that space and throw myself that way. But in terms of running, like 10Ks, 5Ks, trying to do those when
impressive.
I can. Yeah. So not to the degree, but definitely still staying active, because that's important too. It's good for your brain.
Not only good for your brain, but it's good for your immune system just to constantly have that kind of activity. sedentaryism is a killer of people regardless of the condition. You got to
Yeah,
move. We're built to move.
exactly.
So to that end, when you say that you're tired, can you explain to people what that kind of tired means? Because people are going to think, okay, well, after a hard day, I'm tired too. But I don't think, I want to make sure they can appreciate the difference between tired of a hard day and tired that you get from treatments and everything else going on.
Yeah, so I would honestly relate it to like a body tired. So after you're running that marathon and you had your big whatever post marathon meal, like the tired you get when you lay down, it's very similar to that. Or in talking with my friends that are moms, it's the very like sleepless nights tired, where you're just kind of a zombie and just moving through the day, and you learn to work with little sleep. I think for me, it's a lot of the time your body's tired, you're tired. So after treatment, I'm a little bit cranky. I'm just need to extra sleep. And just not, I don't want to say not on my A game, but it's almost like the next day, it's one of those things where it just takes me a while to like get back into hard charging, Morgan, if you will. It takes me about a weekend. So like treatment right now, the schedule that I'm on is every 3 weeks, I get infusions, which is that Kadcyla drug that I mentioned. And then every month I get shots for estrogen suppression. Apparently your body, once it senses that you don't have estrogen as a female, it starts producing it in other ways. So that's a monthly shot there.
Right.
And both of them, like they do different things to me, you know? And I think that you learn real quick what it does to you, your limitations. I never travel, never try to fly after treatment, because it's just exhausting.
So you learn how to compensate for what you know is coming.
Yeah, and I think because it's on a schedule and being a planner, I think that I've thrown myself into that, because I can control my schedule. I just can't control like what the results are going to be. Right. And so that sense of needing that control, I try to throw in other avenues of like, okay, well, how do I control my schedule? How do I control to make sure that I'm going to feel good about the outcomes that I need to produce the following day?
So I want to ask you one technical question. Why is sugar not good for cancer patients?
Yeah, so cancer actually feeds off of sugar, so it kind of like helps it multiply.
So for those who consume a large quantity of either artificial sweeteners or real sweeteners, sugar is a bad thing regardless.
Yeah.
Too much sugar is a bad thing.
Yeah, and I would say definitely stick away from artificial. Like that was the easiest to get rid of. I think for me, the harder is like the fruit and trying to eat a really veggie focused diet. But there's tons of different write-ups on what's best. Lately, I've been like really keen to kind of like keto for cancer, because I love eating meat and I love eating cheese. But the other thing too that's hard for me, my husband makes sourdough bread like a crazy man, and you know, bread eventually turns into glucose. So definitely a balance. I will say some days I'm like, you know what, I just want that piece of bread and I'm gonna eat it.
Well, I was going to say, you don't have, you haven't gone no sugar or no carbs. You've just had to severely restrict how much.
And I would say, yeah. And I would say too, it kind of ebbs and flows, right? Of like, and I would say probably most cancer patients feel this way, where you like are really strict about like following a specific diet or a specific protocol. And then sometimes you're like, you know what, at the end of the day, I still have to live my life. Like if I want a piece of chocolate cake, I want a piece of chocolate cake.
Well,
so I kind of find
my next question. Do you still eat chocolate? So
yes, I still find myself in those situations where like, you know what, I'm going to let myself like treat myself. Or if I had like a really rough treatment where I'm just exhausted and feel like I could just face plant on the couch, like maybe I need some chocolate, you know? Right. But it's one of those things, it's finding that groove that gives you the power to kind of have a structure. You know, I kind of like think about it as it gives me peace of mind knowing that I'm doing something to contribute and not just taking these drugs and like, you know, going through the motions. It's like, okay, I can control this and I can add towards my care plan.
So I've often found when I need to pick me up, and this is just a recommendation for you, Hershey's Nuggets, you know, the little sort of treasure box size nuggets,
Yeah.
and real peanut butter.
Yum.
A combination. I call it the rich man's peanut butter cup. So
good. Especially like the dark cacao that has like no sugar.
yeah.
That's like,
and then with real, like the Smucker's natural peanut butter,
yeah,
with a little bit of
so
the
good.
salt in there and whatnot. Yeah. Yeah.
Even like the crunchy, like that's Bob's move. You and him are
see,
cut
I
from
like
the
the
same
creamy.
cloth.
I like the
Okay.
creamy just with that. Yeah, now I know what I'm having for dessert this weekend. Okay, so I want to ask about your parents.
Yeah.
How did they handle the news, and how have they sort of, because I got to imagine it's raw on them every single day that they think about
Yeah.
it, but how have they sort of built up the scabs to work with it?
You know, we've been a tight knit family. So it's my parents and then my two brothers. I'm in the middle. And they have handled it like in spades and in strides. You know, they moved in with Bob and I. So like a tiny 600, 700 square foot apartment with 4 people is a little rough. That was the first month of our diagnosis.
And only 1 bathroom, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We made it work. And they brought the dog, which was hilarious.
Well,
but you have to, you know, therapy dogs are huge.
Absolutely.
So mom and dad are taking it well. I think the thing that we found out, so once you figure out that you have cancer, they give you this genetics test. I did find out that I had BRCA2. So the next step in that was getting both my parents tested. And so it was weird because obviously they then find out I have cancer, and both of them are like scouring from either sides, talking to relatives. So it was like a great aunt on both sides that had breast cancer. So my mom's was postmenopausal. The great aunt was like in her 60s or 70s or something. And on my dad's side, it was premenopausal. And he had a cousin and an aunt, or great aunt. So a great aunt and a second cousin that passed away in, I want to say their 30s and their 40s. And so, you know, obviously we don't know a lot about these women because they've already passed, but I can only imagine that because healthcare has come thus far, you know, it's similar to what I have. And so that I think was hard for my dad because, you know, he's like, oh, I, you know, gave this to you, but there's, you know, it's genes, like it's genetics. No, you don't have any say.
And unless he knew those women or had some sort of intimate connection to them, how are you
He wouldn't
supposed
have
to
known.
know?
Yeah. So that was crazy to like go back in the lineage and go back in the family trees and find all that out. But they've been rock stars, you know, of course, like everybody, they break down every once in a while and it's hard. And they wish that it was, you know, my dad wishes it was him and my mom wishes it was her. And that's just not our reality. You know, you can't just take away the pain from your children. I mean, in going through this, I think for me, the hardest part is just, like, how do parents do this with kids that are even younger than me? I mean, I'm like an adult. So for us, like Bob and I are just going through the motions, but to like, we've met friends who now have kids that have cancer, like, or that have passed from cancer. And that's just a whole another ballpark.
Yeah. I mean, my wife's brother, when he was in his teens, had 2 battles with leukemia. And back then, he had a 12% chance of survival. And now it's, you know, 30 years later, it's up to 86% for his type of cancer. But he was a guinea pig. One of the reasons why it is 86% is because Matt made it through and made it through what would look like to somebody today, like a barbaric way to treat it. But that was all they knew.
Right.
And they get sort of better. And unfortunately, people like you give them clues on how to detect it or how to fight it in this case. And then somebody hopefully watching this who may unfortunately get this diagnosis will know better what the process is going to be and what the potential treatments will be and how to react and how to mentally prepare. And that's what I want to kind of close with, because you did say you were 60% sort of good and whatnot. I want to ask you about that 40%. Because I know when Susan told me the news, I was sad, obviously, but also I was pissed because it just seemed, it was like I said, it wasn't fair, but this isn't a question of fairness. There's no such thing in this as fairness. But during that 40%, how much of it is you feel sorry for yourself? How much of it do you feel angry? How much of it do you just look at it and say, what the fuck? and just, so take people through, because like I said, you are the most positive person I've ever met. Yeah. But 40%, that's, I want to know what's going through your head that 40% of the time.
Yeah, and I would say it got me, it's taken me a while to be real about the 60%. Like 60%, I'm like old morgues, crushing it, doing great. But like in all reality, like life is hard. So let alone cancer. You know, if somebody's telling you I'm like 90% of the time, like fabulous, like they're lying.
Oh,
Everybody's lying, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think for me, it took me a while to actually like realize that and be real with myself of like, no, it's okay. It's okay to be not okay for 40% of the time, given what you're going through. I would say it's a few different things. One, the uncertainty. I mean, I deal with it every single day, just not knowing what the future is going to hold. And I think that it's scarier and just scarier across the board when your whole world is turned upside down the way that it was, 3 years ago.
Sure.
So that part of it, the other part of it would be being upset that I'm like doing this to my family or doing this to Bob and like, I'm framing it that way because we have to work so hard as cancer patients to think that it's not our fault. And I think that everybody deals with it differently. And I know that in my journey, I will get to the other side of like not placing blame on myself. But that's like a really raw answer of like, I'm working through that. And thank God for weekly therapy, because I think that without that and without being able to talk through different scenarios of how you're feeling and how I would normally react versus let's talk through it and how should you react and like how do you reframe how you think about the situation, that's helped me immensely. But that's being super raw, right? Of like everybody kind of goes through these different processes of grief. We'll call it bucketed into grief. Because you're grieving. Like I'm grieving what I wanted. I wanted to have kids normally. I wanted to, my life to look a certain way. And I think that I'm slowly getting to that process of understanding that nobody really knows or has control over what the future will look like. But for me, that 40% really, really is around control and what the future looks like and being able to allow myself to love myself, even through the ups and the downs, right? Of like being an emotional wreck because I don't want to burden anybody with what I'm going through that I love. And so that's kind of like super raw, but like that's real. It's just like the other 40% of the time, Sean, it's just an emotional roller coaster.
So you mentioned weekly therapy. Did you join a group right away? And
Great question.
Was that recommended to you or did you just decide to do it?
Yeah. So tons of different like Young Cancer Coalition or American Cancer Society. Like there's a ton of different support groups. One in particular in New York, I found through a friend of a friend, and it's called 5 Under 40, and they actually sponsor my therapy. They're phenomenal. They aim to help, or the goal at the time when Jennifer Finkelstein, the founder, created this was to help 5 women under the age of 40 every year diagnosed with breast cancer. Well, the crazy thing is, little did she know that number would just skyrocket. And now like the numbers of people being young diagnosed with breast cancer have just shot up. So I'm pretty sure she helps 50 to maybe 60, 70 girls a year going through this, and they offer different services of helping you with things that insurance doesn't pay for. So in New York City, therapy is one of those things that a lot of times therapists just do private. And so I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to just talk through things and be open to it, and be like, just let the walls and barriers go down to just kind of solve these problems and work through daily life of dealing with cancer. And how do you think about that? I think the hardest part too of that 40% is constantly being reminded, because I'm tired or because I'm feeling a certain way, that like, I do have cancer. And you're like, God, can I just not, like, can I go one day without thinking about this? So that's where the 40% really lies. Is there's always these little daily reminders of whether it's taking meds daily, whether it's, you know, not feeling well, things like that of just pop up.
We're going to go way beyond, because you keep opening up a lot of questions, and I'll keep it under an hour, but I do want to go a little bit longer. How often do you think about it? I mean, in a real day, in a day where a friend of yours is not asking you to be on a Zoom video talking about it, in a real day, how often do you think about it?
Maybe like 3 to 4 times a day. But
and
some
what do you
days,
think about?
Everything from like, why is this side effect this way? Or like, why am I feeling like this? Or when I go out for a walk or go out for a run and I'm way more tired than usual.
Are you thinking that it's getting worse, and that makes you nervous? Or are you just thinking, oh, I'm just extra tired today?
I think it's both, right?
Okay.
I think that living in that constant fear that you're always going to get that call that things aren't going the way that you wanted it. So when they monitor you, they take your blood, they look for different tumor markers, and you basically can like scatter plot them out. And like, as long as you're like kind of like stable, you're good, is the mentality there. And I think that that's hard for somebody that's in sales like myself, where you see the numbers, and when they go up and down and up and down and up and down, you're like, okay, this is a roller coaster. So yeah, I would say absolutely. I think about that. I think about, will I be around? Which is crazy, you know, like, how long will I be around for? Like, how do I prioritize my day to make sure that I'm like being the best wife, you know? So things like that, or the best sister, the best friend, and just milking life. And I think that the opportunity there is to take a step back and be more thankful and like throw myself into it. And I always find myself kind of battling with that, right? Of like finding the balance of a work-life balance, let alone a like cancer life balance.
Yeah. So the stuff that you think is small or inconsequential piss you off now?
I would say I've gotten better at not sweating the small stuff. I used to be a loose cannon when it came to that, if I can be honest.
I remember,
Yeah, where now it's like things roll off my back easier, unless if they're like related to family or friends, and then I like my mama bear in me comes out, and
yeah, but I'm talking about
story.
And I don't want to jump on social media, so we'll just keep it on the news or you know, piddly little things that people stress about and get upset about, and you're sitting there saying, you know what, I don't know if tomorrow's going to come around for me or be the same as it is today, and you're worried about this. Does that get you, or do you just kind of ignore it now?
It depends. I would say some days I'm like, really? And other days I just ignore it. But
okay.
You know, it kind of depends. It depends on what it is specifically.
Okay, fair enough. All right. I have so many more questions, but I'm gonna stop there. Because I
Awesome.
really do. You
Thank
are,
you.
one, you're a fascinating person to talk to just by itself, but what you've learned and what you've gone through as makes you, puts you in a different category at the moment. And one that I don't think many people would switch places with you on, but could draw knowledge and strength from.
Yeah, I think the perspective you get, Sean, when you get something like this allows you to reframe and be more positive. I will also say, I think that in a weird way, my cancer diagnosis has made me even more positive, because the only way you fight and beat this kind of stuff is like really being the most positive person you possibly can be. Because if you look at it, the glass half empty, you're kind of setting yourself up to fail. So that's been my mantra. Like the mantra with my family is we're just going to be happy, healthy, and like run with positivity.
And pet the dog often.
Yes, often. Yes, go get a COVID puppy.
Well, we got a puppy. We just didn't know it was going to be a COVID puppy. We got a puppy in the middle of February 2020, and it just happened to luck out that a month later, she was going to be the primary reason we got outside for a couple of weeks. So
Absolutely.
Hey, I really appreciate you doing this. I'm glad
Of
I didn't
course.
cry. I came close a couple of times.
I came close.
I know. I came close, but I didn't do it. And I want to come and see the new house, but I'm bringing the football with me. So you better have your
and bring
receiver
Roxy.
gloves. Oh, Roxy, without a doubt. But I'm more
Awesome.
interested in the football. So make sure
Let's
you
do
have your
it.
receiver gloves on there. So thank you again. Check out the details of the video, because any link that Morgan thinks is important above and beyond her LinkedIn profile, anything that she wants to share is going to be in the video description. Morgan, you were amazing. I hope to do a part 2 with you.
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
2021, when we talk about how effective, I just heard the puppy, how effective your treatments are going.
Awesome.
And for everybody who joined us, I really want to thank you for staying with us. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like button. Not that I'm after the like buttons, but how can you not like Morgan? I mean, come on, let's be serious. This has been another edition of Did You Know That? If you like this video, check out some of the other videos that I've posted, and make sure you subscribe with the bell so that you get notified about future videos. And Morgan, I look forward to seeing you in person.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.